Welcome to Developing Student Writing. My name is Allison Poindexter, a career educator and a student in teaching composition. Today we're going to talk specifically about developing student writing through modeling and scaffolding. Adults or practice writers have the experience of reviewing a paragraph of text and recognizing its repetitiveness. I recognized my own last week when I was writing a description of a student. You might notice a familiar pattern and cadence to these sentences. Each sentence starts with a subject, either a noun or pronoun, and is followed by a verb: seemed, shared, is, felt. Not all the writing is the same, and not all writing needs creativity. Certainly, for the purposes of this writing task, a diagnostic reading assessment, the writing doesn't need to jump off the page. It doesn't need to be memorable. It needs to accomplish a task. But not all of my writing is this way, and certainly not all writing is this way. Now consider one of my favorite passages written in the English language. Now suppose you're as familiar with this letter written by Captain Frederick Wentworth as I am. In that case, you know he scrawled this missive in the moments before he was set to leave a house on an errand, determined to confess his love for Persuasion's heroine, Anne Elliot. These words certainly have a different purpose than mine. They certainly have a different pattern and cadence than mine. And Captain Wentworth would argue that his writing needed to accomplish a much different task. What I'm going to recommend today is that teachers of writing can support their students through modeling, that is, writing side by side with their students, sharing the writing process and their writing, and scaffolding, that is, providing explicit strategic support for student writers to move students from novice to more capable independent writers. Teachers, you don't need to be novelists to be extraordinary writing teachers. Using these two strategies intentionally and strategically can improve writing instruction from every teacher. So the objective for today: empower teachers with effective methods and resources for enhancing student writing through modeling and scaffolding. Let's begin with modeling. Modeling is essentially the teacher as a model, writing alongside students. Now, writing is personal, it's risky, and this is intimidating. I will name this up front. It is seriously intimidating to write in front of students. My middle schoolers love to roast my spelling errors, my awkward expressions, my out of date turns of phrase. But that's what modeling is: showing students that our own mistakes so they aren't afraid to make their own. There are numerous benefits to both teachers and students from modeling. I want to highlight a couple of these points. I want to begin with how modeling improves assessment practices, especially in this season. Especially in this season when assessment is so important. Writing with students makes teachers more capable of how to assess students, and in turn provide students with better instruction. Students who receive better instruction do better writing. I also want to highlight this moment here that students see the teacher struggle with the complexity and chaos of writing. This helps demystify the writing process. Students no longer maintain the false impression that good writing just flows at will. It doesn't. And there are moments when, even for experienced writers, writing is awkward and choppy and painful, and you can't come up with the right word. In fact, um, in some of these strategies to try, we'll see that. Um, for example, if you are brave and you project your writing for students to see, um, then students can see your work as you're working on it, not for show, but to demonstrate the authentic and painful and awkward and ugly writing process. Show them that blank that you leave when you can't think of the right word. Show them how many times Grammarly had to come to your aid. And in my life, it's often. And I consider myself a pretty strong writer, and I still need Grammarly to come to my aid. Um, Another strategy to try is that students write more and teachers grade less. Gallagher suggests a 4-to-1 ratio for student writing to teacher assessment. Students should be writing way more than teachers assess. Now, I realize that this is a much bigger conversation. We could be talking about grading practices. We could be talking about what students expect to be graded. That they're really comfortable with worksheets being graded and given a check mark for completion. We could be talking about that, but we're not going to here. But really, students need to be writing way more than how many times teachers are assessing it. Another strategy that's really powerful is this talking the paper out, telling the story first, taking notes about key points. I really love this idea, especially for our contemporary students. Students are so used to verbal storytelling, so make this part of their writing process. Have them tell their stories if they're making a TikTok, story time. We know that those stories, we know what makes those stories powerful. It would take nothing to move from that format into a written account. And finally, model creating a map or an outline before writing. I love this strategy. It's one of my favorites. I love creating an old school web for my students of a writing plan. I think it's funny how strategies that I used in high school are still relevant today. For some students, at least. I recognize that it's not relevant for all, but it's just I use webs as just another way of capturing my thinking and showing students how even the most experienced writer in the classroom, me, because I'm the oldest, can plan her writing. And I, for real, like I will draw circles and I'll write words in them and I'll draw arrows between things and I'll cross stuff out and I'll show them that, like, even me, who I'm the most concrete sequential person you'll think of, even I'm making crazy arrows and I'm doing crazy things as I'm planning my writing. So these are just some strategies to try. Now, there are risks to modeling. Gallagher quotes Stahl as he addressed the Grecian urn phenomenon, the idea that simply showing students a Grecian urn will be enough to inspire them to produce a Grecian urn of their own. Showing students a model isn't enough. We need to support students through each step of construction, and we're going to get to that when we talk about scaffolding next. Also, modeling can turn into a vanity exercise, and I've seen this for myself. And I've uncovered it in my own writing and my own teaching. That modeling isn't about my writing, really. It's about my students' writing. It's not about making me feel good, giving me a pat on the head. It should be humbling. It should be awkward. It should be showing students that even a knowledgeable teacher struggles, but it can be powerful. It can be joyful. So show them all of the aspects of the writing process. Don't make yourself out to be, extraordinary. So now let's talk about scaffolding, the process in which the teacher helped each child become interested in the task and understand the important components of the task, then supported each child's progress with one-on-one interactions. That's from Benko 2012. The idea behind scaffolding is that teacher intervention will gradually decrease and students will eventually accomplish the task independently. The concept of scaffolding is often linked to my old friend Vygotsky and his zone of proximal development. Now I'm going to call that ZPD from now on. As a reminder, ZPD is defined as the distance between the actual developmental level as determined by independent problem solving, and the level of potential development as determined by problem solving under adult guidance or in collaboration with more capable peers. Scaffolding is a helpful metaphor for thinking about forms of instruction that allow students to move through their ZPDs. With scaffolding, students' potential is far beyond what it would be without. Again, that's Benko 2012. ZPD calls attention to the level of challenge associated with the task, while scaffolding is necessary for tasks beyond students' independent capabilities, called intellectual appropriateness. Considering the task's required intellectual work is an important part of scaffolding. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But how often do teachers at every grade level consider this intellectual work before assigning it? I know that for a long time, as a teacher at the high school level, especially, I was not thinking about how appropriate a task was for the grade level or for the capability of my students. So I was often assigning things that were too hard or too easy. So there are several practices that teachers can engage in to provide the scaffolding structure, including reducing the degree of freedom. Now, this means to simplify the demands of the task and allow students to master the smaller, easier to manage components. Marking critical features, that is, identifying the parts of the task that might cause a student to stumble and assess points of student confusion to help students move past them. We're going to talk more about each of those in a little bit. Now, direction maintenance, this is hilarious to me. And I bet you didn't know it, but your scaffolding naturally, in most cases, direction maintenance is prompting students to return to the task when they become distracted. Now, every middle school teacher is providing direction maintenance. You can't give a student a task of length and expect that they are going to easily and naturally flow through it without any trouble. They need to be reminded of what tasks to accomplish. So maybe give them checkpoints, maybe give them signposts, maybe say in 15 minutes you're going to check in with me about this part of the work. So there's a lot of ways that we already and naturally complete direction maintenance. And then finally, demonstration. And that's, guess what? That's modeling. So in some ways, we're already providing scaffolding. Now I found this graphic from Benko really, really helpful to me to understand how scaffolding is a process. And we've already talked about teacher instruction. We've talked about these elements already. These scaffolding interactions occur within a process, but you'll notice I haven't spoken extensively about two other parts of this process: task selection and the teacher stance. These additional components can make for scaffolding success, which is when a student internalizes learning and can transfer that knowledge or skill to other tasks. I found this really to be helpful as I was trying to understand the complexity of scaffolding. I think I do want to talk a little bit about each of these elements. I'll come back to them later, but I think I do want to talk about them a little bit right now. We've talked a little bit about choosing the right task. We've talked a little bit about the teacher's instructions. Let's talk about the teacher stance. It's so important that a teacher has the appropriate kind of interaction with a student, that has the right attitude with a student, that they are supporting students when they're going through these challenges. I call it kind of being a warm demander. I didn't come up with that at all. But as often as possible, the teacher walks side by side with the student and is a collaborator, collaborates with the student instead of being an evaluator alone. Let's take a look at some resources. There are so many tremendous resources to support scaffolding and writing instruction, but I wanted to name three here: the Writing Revolution from Hockman and Wexler, and Grammar for Middle School and High School from Kilgallen. Each tool provides scaffolds to students by reducing degrees of freedom in marking critical features. They prompt teachers to shrink the writing task to sentence or paragraph level, which is much more manageable for students. By prompting students to attend um, only to the sentence composing tool, for example, teachers are more able to diagnose writing challenges and provide mini lessons accordingly. Let's take a look at one example from Grammar for High School. Here's the sentence composing tool, the delayed adverb. The resource provides some background for the tool, that the delayed adverb is an adverb placed after the action described. It also offers teaching about what an adverb is and provides many examples. I'm only sharing one example here, the multiple delayed adverbs example. He worked himself to death, finally and precisely, at 3 a.m. Sunday morning. That's from Ellen Goodman's Close to Home. Grammar for High School offers various practice options, but I will share just one, the unscrambling to imitate practice. Here, the tool offers a model and a sample we're charged with unscrambling. Then students are prompted to write their own sentences. So let's take a look at this model. As I watched him, he seemed to adjust himself a little, visibly. That's from F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. So my first job would be to unscramble these sample pieces. And the way that I would do this is I would look for the easy part. So lamely is the last thing in this sentence. And he seemed to adjust himself a little. She tried to excuse herself. That looks like the subject and verb of the sentence. So when she told him looks like the beginning of the sentence, and then that a little comes there. So when she told him, she tried to excuse herself a bit lamely. Ooh, I wonder what that sentence is about. I wonder, maybe she's like trying to turn a boy down for a date or something like that. That's interesting. Okay, so I tried to come up with my own model sentence, and I tried to give you a glimpse of my thought process. And when I come up with these sentences on my own, I always think about the subject of my sentence first. Who do I want to write about? And I try to think of something that's meaningful to me, or I try to connect it to a writing task, a larger writing task that we're completing, but I don't have a big writing task. So I'm thinking about the student that I just met with this today, and he was distracted by his girlfriend who he saw when we were walking together in the hallway. He couldn't even attend to working with me because he was worried that she was thinking about him cheating on her or something. So that's where I'm coming from. So who do I want to write about? My student. What is he doing? He's thinking about his girlfriend. He's distracted by his girlfriend. So, and then I immediately went to he seemed, but seemed is repetitive, so I don't want to do that. So here's my sentence. I started here. He retreated into himself. Ooh, and you'll notice that H is capitalized. You can see that I started there because I capitalized it. He retreated into himself is where I started. Then I went backwards. As I asked him the question, he retreated into himself noticeably. Now, give yourself 5 points if you realize what I missed in my sample sentence. I'm going to give you just a moment to think about it. I missed this a little. I missed that right before the adverb in the sentence. Okay, so you'll see how my process went. I read the model, we unscrambled the sample, and then I wrote another example. As the most experienced writer in the room, I would write my own sentence, and to match it to the model, as I've done here, I would invite my students to share their own sentence and critique mine. And as many times as I've used this tool with my students, many times, many times, my students have written better sentences than mine. And I let them, great, good job. I let them roast my examples. Sometimes they're terrible. This one I'm not terribly thrilled about. So here we go. Now, there are risks in scaffolding too. Most significantly, teachers might fail to transfer responsibility to students, meaning we might hold on to the scaffolding for too long. This is a very real struggle. My students sometimes want to avoid stepping into doing the hard work of thinking on their own because it is hard work. The easier pathway for teachers and for students is to continue to make the work easy for students, but that doesn't prepare students for challenges beyond the classroom. Another risk is when teachers fail to move beyond the reduced or simplified task as the goal. Consider the 5-paragraph essay. For so long, teachers have used it as a scaffold that we've almost forgotten that there is a whole world of writing beyond it. Overcoming these risks is challenging and requires awareness from teachers, but isn't insurmountable. So let's return to this graphic. Through modeling and scaffolding, I can develop student writing in many ways. I can recruit my students into the task by providing a meaningful, appropriately challenging task. I can plan the task alongside my students. I can show them my own vulnerability. I might provide instruction to my students about how to craft one sentence, shrinking the task and making it feel more manageable. I can partner and collaborate with my students, helping them to feel that I'm on their side, not just as their evaluator. Teachers of writing can support their students through modeling and scaffolding. Modeling involves writing alongside students and sharing the writing process, while scaffolding provides explicit strategic support for student writers to become more capable and independent. These two strategies can improve writing instruction for every teacher. Thank you, and thank you for your time.